Today was another day of shame for Sir Keir Starmer. Yet again, he appeared to call people who have concerns about Pakistani rape gangs far-right racists.
Politicians who sat in government for many years, calling for inquiries because they want to jump on a bandwagon of the far right.
He's way out of touch. Caring about young girls being raped on an industrial scale by foreign men from a community that the Labour Party courted for decades does not make you far right. To say that everyone who cares about this issue is a Tommy Robinson supporter is the language of attempted demonisation, and it doesn't work anymore. Why? Because Tommy Robinson has a problematic past. But millions of people are willing to look at this issue right now and say, you know what? He was right about the problem of grooming gangs. It was on Starmer's watch as Director of Public Prosecutions that charges were dropped against 9 men of mainly Pakistani backgrounds for the rape of a young teenager in Rochdale. She reportedly gave her underwear containing the DNA of one of her attackers to police, and charges were dropped because they decided that she would not be seen as a reliable witness by a jury. Starmer was not personally involved in the decisions to drop those charges, but he was DPP then. Several years later, those men were found guilty. They'd been plying girls as young as 13 with drink and drugs and raping them. Now, he's ruling out a national inquiry specifically into Pakistani rape gangs. Is it to try to cover for his own failures, do you think? Our political editor asked him.
Why don't you order a national public inquiry to join the dots between 50 towns, not 6, barely mentioned in the J report? Are you afraid it might expose failings as your role as a DPP?
I set out what I did. I actually changed the system because I could see some of the things that were going wrong. I wasn't prepared. Unlike, some Tory politicians, I'm not tweeting about it or talking about it. I got on with changing it.
OK, well, I don't think that's good enough. I don't think his record is good enough. And now Starmer is accusing Elon Musk of crossing a line when it comes to Jess Phillips, who is also refusing to have this inquiry.
It is never an excuse to use race and ethnicity or community relations as an excuse not to investigate and punish sex offenders.
Now, look, yes, OK, nobody should ever wish any harm to Jess Phillips or anyone else. But, I think it's fair to say that she hasn't exactly covered herself in glory over the years. And what you just heard there was Yvette Cooper piping up, saying, of course, that we can't let ethnicity stop us from investigating child abuse. But unfortunately for Yvette, it has done. It has done. An inquest found fears of being called Islamophobic meant the police didn't do their jobs. And if Labour think they're trying to kid anyone about taking this issue seriously, then maybe we should just listen to how their MPs heckled Shadow Home Secretary Chris Philp when he said that it's not far right to care about grooming gangs.
A word on the Prime Minister's comments this morning. It is not far right to stand up for victims of mass rape. And smearing people.
Order.
Smearing people who raise those issues is exactly how this ended up getting covered up in the first place.
Listen to that. Just listen to that reaction. And I am convinced that what the Prime Minister has said today, along with what he said during the disorder in the summer, was intended to try to scare people into silence by calling everyone racist. But like I said, the window shifted. It doesn't work anymore. Now, Cooper's announced some window dressing today. So there's going to be this new survivors and victims panel. It remains to be seen what that really looks like. It's going to be illegal not to report child abuse. All right, fine, OK. But just have an inquiry specifically into Pakistani grooming gangs. Just do it. About 50 towns across Britain have suffered. Tens, if not hundreds of thousands of young girls have suffered. Just do it. Stop covering it up. If you're afraid that the scale of the problem would cause civil unrest, then the solution to that is to deal with the problem and not to try to hide it from us. And it's on this note that I would like to make Elon Musk an offer that I hope he will not refuse. So, look, Mr. Musk, you've been very vocal recently. You've said that Starmer and others are complicit in these crimes and a cover-up. And you, it seems, and I'm sure this is genuine, care deeply about young girls who've been, and in my view, by the way, continue to be, raped on an industrial scale by Pakistani gangs. So why don't you and I sit down together and have a conversation about it? We'll put it out on whatever platform you like. We'll do it absolutely live, so there's no editing. Nothing will be off limits. We should even use our discussion, and this is the offer. Why don't we get together and have a discussion and use it to raise money for the Maggie Oliver Foundation, a charity founded in the wake of the Rochdale grooming gang scandal that helps survivors in any way they can. I think we would raise a lot of money together, Mr. Musk, a lot of money. I will travel to wherever in the world you are. I could get on a plane tonight if need be. Why don't we have that conversation? And it would be a conversation. Raise some serious money for the brave survivors of those horrendous rape gangs. Let's get thoughts from my panel this evening. Broadcaster and journalist Carol Malone. We've also got the journalist Benjamin Butterworth and the former chairman of the Tory party, Sir Jake Berry. Carol, look, just on that, let's deal with the Starmer thing there, really. That saying, we're jumping on a far-right bandwagon. He just doesn't get it, does he?
He really doesn't get it, This is what people like him do. They deflect. So rather than have to deal with this, he's now blaming other people for their involvement. He's now saying that Jess Phillips has been wrongly criticised. No, I'm sorry. Jess Phillips is the safeguarding minister for women and for children, and she refused this investigation. And why did she do it? Mainly, I suspect, because she was told to by her Prime Minister, and mainly to protect her Muslim vote. She'd only just won her seat in the last election. Jess Phillips used to be a highly respected working-class voice. Now, to me, she has no credibility.
There's an irony with Jess Phillips, actually. I will just say this, right, because she's come out with all this stuff now, and, I'll just say it, right, all this stuff now about, oh, gosh, it's terrible what's going on with Jess Phillips, and she's being dug out. And it is. No one in politics ever, or any walk of life actually, should ever be targeted about anything. We've seen too much violence.
I'm sorry.
But when she won her election,
yes,
she stood up on that plinth at the account, and she was saying she'd suffered horrific abuse during that campaign by men in the pro-Palestine.
And can I say what she also said? Remember when Giselle Pellico, the French lady, went to court, who'd been raped multiple times, 51 men arranged by her husband? Jess Phillips said that this woman's experience, this brave woman's experience in getting, allowing herself to be identified, would change the world. So why isn't she allowing these Rochdale girls to change the world? We can't even change what's happening in our country with these girls, never mind the rest of the world. And she could have helped to do that, and she's chosen not to. And Starmer should be absolutely ashamed of himself. He's attacking the Tories today for not doing anything. While he's not doing anything. He could easily do this inquiry. Just have it. He says there's been local inquiries. Local inquiries don't work because the local people aren't going to convict themselves or point the finger at themselves.
The reaction of Keir Starmer earlier on, trotting out that same stuff, trying to demonise anyone, going, oh, well, you're just jumping on a far-right bandwagon. It doesn't work anymore. I'm sorry, but there'll be millions of people up and down the country that go, I'm sorry, if caring about the victims of Pakistani rape gangs makes me far-right, then here, I am Spartacus.
Yeah.
Look, I mean, you're right, he doesn't get it. It's completely outrageous. Every parent or every person who has a relative watching this show tonight, if their children or a family member or even just someone they knew or someone in their community was a victim of these appalling rape gangs, they want it to be investigated. Why does that make you a far-right sympathiser? This is the label that Keir Starmer uses to put on people who just don't agree with him. And let's look at this issue of the public inquiry. So the Prime Minister, a few Prime Ministers ago, back in 2014, set up an inquiry into child sex abuse, which partially covered this. The situation has now changed. We now know that it was much more widespread, 50, not 6 towns as originally thought. Yep. Oldham Council has come to the government and asked for this public inquiry. Why is the government refusing? Let's not forget, in the Labour Party's manifesto in June, they said they'd hold a public inquiry into the Battle of Orgreave, something that happened 40 years ago, where no one was killed. 100 people were injured. It was a very serious event, but no one was killed. Rachel Reeves, remember her? Rachel from Accounts. She said in 2017, when she was chairman of the selection committee, we need a full public inquiry into interest rates on car loans. And as recently as 2020, a shadow cabinet minister called for a full inquiry into what wallpaper the then Prime Minister Boris Johnson had put up in his flat in number 10 Downing Street. They love public inquiries, but apparently not in this case. And you ask yourself why.
Yeah.
It's because Keir Starmer has a tremendous case of amnesia again from his time as public prosecutor. He doesn't really know why. He wasn't directly involved in this, just like apparently he wasn't directly involved in the Jimmy Savile case. You know, he claims all the time, look, I was director of public prosecution, I was tough, I'm tough on criminals, but whenever one of these serious cases comes forward, apparently nothing to do with him.
He takes credit for a lot and then has a habit, I would argue, maybe of distancing himself. Again, I was just stressed. Look, he's not here to defend himself when it comes to Savile and all
well,
of that.
On the Jimmy Savile point, he formally apologised on behalf of his department as Director of Public Prosecution. You can't have it both ways. I've been in the House of Commons where he shouted at Boris about COVID, you know, the buck stops with you. The buck stops with you, Prime Minister, as leader of the DPP and as Prime Minister. Get on and do it.
And on that, Benjamin, is this not what we're looking at here? Is this not, when it comes to Keir Starmer, are we not looking at the living, breathing embodiment of a man who cannot have this national inquiry because of what it would do to his reputation?
Correct.
No, nonsense, complete nonsense. I mean, first of all, the request from the Council for a national inquiry was turned down under the last government as well. So what Jess Phillips did was exactly the same as the previous one, and partly because 7 years was spent on a national inquiry into child sexual exploitation.
She said she turned down the national investigation because it should be a local council investigation. She said it so that's entirely wrong.
But it's not wrong to say that the last government made the same decision, and there was a 7-year inquiry.
Okay, so why isn't Starmer doing... So the last government didn't do it right, and both governments are totally to blame for this, but so if the last government did, why isn't Starmer saying, let's get it out?
Let's just do it into Pakistani grooming, guys. No, that's the difference, because that previous inquiry, my understanding was, included a load of things.
It's much wider.
Look, great, and as far as I'm concerned, any aspect of child sexual abuse needs to be investigated, there needs to be an inquiry, fine. But let's just have a look now at this issue, because this, I would argue, is an epidemic. You know, when we had things like the infected blood scandal, we didn't then decide to have an inquiry into other aspects of NHS care. We focused on that. So why don't we just focus on Pakistani rape gangs, Benjamin?
I have no objection to doing an inquiry, but the idea that this is some silver bullet, you know, we just had a 7-year inquiry. It made 20 recommendations 2 years ago to the last government. They implemented none of them. And who was at the cabinet table? Kemi Badenoch. The audacity that
for the Labour
Daily Express, and she said an inquiry, quote unquote, is long overdue.
So is that right?
So why doesn't Starmer just say today, let's have the inquiry, and when he's done it, name the academics,
I'll tell you why.
The politicians,
I'll tell you why. It's because all of the...
Who was it that the Conservative government said had done more than most in its documents to help fix this issue? It was Theresa May. Theresa May, as Home Secretary, said that Keir Starmer had done more than most to fix this.
So number one, there were recommendations. The government today said they have got a chance to do something about it. The Labour government said they won't implement. They've said that today. They will not give a date for him. Why won't the Labour Party have an investigation? Let's call a spade a shovel. Number one. I'll tell you why they won't. Because all of these gangs, these 50 towns, were mainly... I did, actually. You can look at my record. Were mainly Labour councils. And the victims have said that they went and gave evidence to Labour councillors and they refused to believe them. Keir Starmer was DPP at the time, and people were not prosecuted when they should have been. This, like the post office, like the infected blood, this is a government cover-up of young, white, working-class girls being raped in towns up and down the country, and it needs to stop, and they can do something about it.
Yeah, of course they are. They're worried about social unrest, and yet again, my fear would be this, that instead of saying, right, the true scale of this could cause people, and I am not recommending this for a second, we shouldn't do, could cause people to go outside and get very angry about it all. So instead of revealing that to people, they'll just hide it.
They cover it up.
And it makes people more angry.
They're protecting the Muslim vote. They don't want to criticise Pakistani Muslims because they're protecting the Muslim vote. What kind of people are leading us when they put party politics above the lives of young girls? Party politics and political correctness.
No, of course
you disagree. You disagree.
And the people that are playing politics with this, people like Elon Musk, that don't have a clue. They couldn't point out Alderman Rochdale on a map. No, all he wants to do is to whip up anger and hatred and unrest. He doesn't give a damn about those girls. And your intro...
Why does he?
Your intro named that case in which a victim didn't get her case heard because they said that they would look at a girl like her and believe her. That was why Keir Starmer, as Director of Public Prosecutions, rewrote the rules on how you deal with those children.
If that's true, surely he'd welcome the inquiry. Why doesn't he welcome the inquiry?
And who said he'd done a good job? The Conservative Justice Secretary, the Conservative Home Secretary.
Benjamin, I'm more inclined to listen to victims.
Attorney General.
I'm more inclined to listen to victims.
Well, that's exactly what he did.
And I'm more inclined
You're more
to
bothered about stirring up social unrest than dealing with this issue. And I think people that are tweeting this because they want to get attention out of it.
You're deflecting again.
It's ridiculous. I'm sorry. How dare you say that people
Jess Phillips has done more than any of us to help this.
No, she has not.
No, she has not.
No. She had a chance. She blew it. She can talk about caring about this issue. She had a chance to help these young girls, and she didn't. And that's the end of it.
As for Elon Musk, thank God he's in this round, because he's the one who's made everyone start talking about this again. If he hadn't done this, if he hadn't accused Starmer and all the rest of them, we wouldn't be talking about this tonight. And
I'll just say again,
thank God he's around.
Just to bring this full circle. The offer is seriously there, all right? And I do think this is a good offer. I do think this is something that is actually in literally everybody's interest. Because, Elon Musk has been, as I'm sure everyone has seen, paying close attention to the output of this channel recently, and especially things that have been said on social media. And he's been engaging with this kind of thing. And I think it would be a fantastic opportunity for Elon to, not just say what he's saying on X and whatever, but to have a conversation about this. And do it on whatever platform, and in doing that, raising what I think will be a heck of a lot of money for a cause which he clearly cares about, which is, young girls who've been systematically abused and raped by predominantly Pakistani rape gangs across the country, that Maggie Oliver Foundation. So I hope he takes me up on this offer. I really would hope.
You know what's terrifying, Patrick? When powerful Muslims in this country see the way this government is dealing with this and the way past governments have, nothing is going to change. Nothing is going to stop. The abuse will not stop. Maggie Oliver knows that. That's why she's actually attacking politicians personally. She knows nothing's going to change. We owe it to the young women of this country to make this change.
Yeah.
All right. Fair enough. Well, look, OK, there we go. Obviously, incredibly hard-hitting topic at the start there, but an important one nonetheless. And thank you very much all for getting stuck in on that. So there we go.